Viewing life from a hearse, it could be worse. Laugh, think, and cry with the country undertaker.
On 7-14. Here's the pitch by Downing. Swinging. There's a drive into left center field. That ball is going to be out of here. It's gone. It's 7-15. There's a new home run champion of all time, and it's Henry Aaron. The fireworks are going. Henry Aaron is coming around third. His teammates are at home plate, and listen to this crowd. A sellout crowd is cheering Henry Aaron, the home run king of all time. 7-15.
My first love in the sports arena was baseball. I ended up being an all-sports fan, but it all started with baseball. I was fortunate to play baseball in an organized league in our little town beginning at 8 years old. Since the league consisted of kids between the ages of 8 to 12, I learned to play against people older and better than me. Through that very tough competition at first and a few tears, I learned to appreciate the game of baseball. Back in those days, we only got 3 channels on our TV. The TVs were small and mostly black and white. Sometimes the horizontal knob would have to be adjusted to keep the tube from rolling. And there were other times we would have to go outside to point the antenna in a different direction to get better reception. The only time a game was televised during the season was on the game of the week on Saturday afternoon. The Yankees were on almost every week, playing other American League teams. I became a Yankees fan, as did most of my friends. Names like Mantle and Maris and Boyer and Skowron and Howard and Berra and Pepitone and Richardson, Tresh and Kubek were household names and real heroes to us. The World Series each year was also a big deal. A very big deal. The games were played in the daytime. In school, they would roll a TV out on a stand to our room in the afternoon so we could all watch it. It was during those World Series games and collecting baseball cards that we got to know most of the players in the National League. But make no mistake, I was a die-hard Yankees fan. Then something happened. The Milwaukee Braves moved to Atlanta in 1966. At the beginning, I was glad they were there, but I still loved the Yankees. At some point during that first year, my parents took us to a Braves game in Atlanta. My world changed that day. Now I could see in person what I'd only seen through a little static TV before. Real Major League Baseball players playing the game of baseball. I was fortunate to go to several games in Atlanta those first years after the Braves came to town. As I got older, I would go to many. When my sister lived in Atlanta, my mama would drop me and a friend off at Atlanta Stadium for a doubleheader. We'd be in the stadium all afternoon and had a specific place to meet her when the game was over. That did not end when I became an adult. I later shared season tickets with a few friends for several years. Obviously, the Yankees took a back seat, and I became a huge Braves fan. With that, I also became a huge Hank Aaron fan. Some of the younger folks probably don't know how good he really was. He was what they call a five-tool player. He could hit for average, hit homers, he had an incredible arm, he was a defensive star, and he was fast. He did it all. It was worth it just to see him play. I can still see him throw a ball on a line from right field to the plate. At the plate, he seemingly just flicked the ball with his wrist and it would fly out of the stadium. Just to add a little flavor, Aaron was not just a home run hitter. Aaron holds the Major League Baseball record for most career RBIs, 2,297, extra base hits, 1,477, and total bases, 6,856. He is also in the top 5 for career hits, 3,771, and runs scored, 2,174. He is only one of 4 players to have at least 17 seasons with 150 or more hits. Hank also had a 305 lifetime batting average. This guy could play. When the season began in 1974, Hank was very close to a record many thought would never be broken. Aaron had finished the 1973 season just 1 home run short of Babe Ruth's career record. He hit home run number 713 on September 29th, 1973. And with 1 day remaining in the season, many expected him to tie the record. But in his final game that year, playing against the Astros, led by manager Leo DeRocher, who had once roomed with Babe Ruth, he was unable to hit one out of the park. Over the winter, Hank Aaron received many death threats and a large assortment of hate mail. Some did not want to see a black man break Babe Ruth's record. The truth is, I was aware all that was going on, but all my friends were pulling for Hank Aaron to break Babe Ruth's record. And trust me, so was I. Even Babe Ruth's widow said the Babe would have been cheering for Hank Aaron. Aaron tied Babe Ruth's record in Cincinnati during the Braves' first series in 1974. The Braves management had planned on holding Hank out of the lineup in Cincinnati because they wanted him to break the record in Atlanta. The commissioner ruled that he had to play at least 2 of the 3 games. On April the 8th of that year, I was ending up my second year at the University of Georgia. A group of us at the Lambda Chi House decided on a Sunday night that we would go to Atlanta to the game the next day and try to get tickets. It was the first home game of the year, and we obviously had no way of knowing if he would hit the home run or not. But we were in the stands on that magical and historic night. In the bottom of the 4th inning, Hank Aaron hit a shot off Al Downing over the fence to left center field. Everybody in that stadium went nuts. It was one of the greatest moments in sports. I have always been very proud that I was at that game that night. Today, I have a special guest and an old friend joining me. He was also at the game, but he saw it from a different perspective than anyone else. His life would never be the same. In fact, Cliff Courtney and his buddy Britt Gaston ended up right there with the great Hank Aaron in the Hall of Fame in Cooperstown. Cliff Courtney is with us today, and he has a very interesting story. He's doing this as a favor to me. Cliff and I were fraternity brothers at the University of Georgia back so many years ago that we can't even remember the details of much of any of it. But Cliff is from Waycross. Cliff, can you hear me? Are you on?
Loud and clear. I'm here on the beautiful coast of Georgia, as far southeast in Georgia as is possible, and the sun is shining. It's a little chilly, but it's a beautiful day.
I do thank you for doing this. I thank you. I think people are going to find out that you have a very unique perspective on one of the greatest sporting events that ever took place in the world when Hank Aaron broke Babe Ruth's record. I think people are going to find that very interesting. So let's talk about a little bit about, you grew up in Waycross, right?
Yes, I was born in Jacksonville, Florida, and at age 3 moved to Waycross, as I like to joke, in search of work, and my family joined me shortly after. But closer to the truth is my sister. I have one sibling, a sister, and my mother and father moved. So that was about 59,
right?
Somewhere.
But anyway, you grew up in Waycross, and you had a buddy down there by the name of Britt Gaston. I guess you probably grew up with him as well, right?
No, actually, Britt and his family moved from Memphis, Tennessee, and that was probably around, I'm guessing, grade 9. We were in a small private school, and the definition of an athlete at this school is if you could walk and chew gum. So most of us were athletes.
Well, I grew up in the same kind of small town environment. I can promise you that.
There was Waycross High and then Ware County High, which are, considerably bigger, but I had 12 in my graduating class, if that tells you anything.
Oh, wow. Well, that may contribute to this story.
Yeah. Well, we hit it off pretty much. He was the new kid on the block, and sometimes that can be a stressful situation. We ended up just kind of connecting. We just hit it off and became, as they say in the South, running buddies.
So I remember first meeting you at the Lambda Chi House at the University of Georgia, and I know you were a few years below me. I may have moved out of the house when you moved in the house. But I think so. I remember you well, and we became fraternity brothers. The thing about being a fraternity brother at the University of Georgia, or being in a fraternity at the University of Georgia, that it doesn't matter if you're the same year. If you're in the same general years, you know a lot of the same people. The names that come up, people remember them up and down. And I had lunch the other day with 4 fraternity brothers that were more your age, most of them, than mine. But it's amazing how many people we all know. I mean, you 120, 150 people that we all know. So it was a very neat time. And you had a buddy that was a little older that was already in the fraternity house named Doug Lee.
Yep.
Who was my good friend in Athens. And I know I met you through him. And I think probably you came into fraternity through him. And I'm sure he had me as a little bit older than him, pushing you to become a fraternity brother.
Yes. That's my recollection as well.
Yeah. So then you graduated and you became an eye doctor, right?
Yeah. And again, as happens so many times in our lives where we are influenced by others, hopefully in mostly positive ways. But in this case, I met a couple of people, came to know them. One of them I'd known for a while, who were doing that and kind of got me interested in it. But really that wasn't the direction I was heading in. I was actually, like a lot of young people in college, thinking of different options, and right. What am I going to do with my life, that kind of stuff. And some have a very specific direction, others don't. But I was headed I was interested in biopsychology, and was hanging out with some PhD candidates and entertaining thought of going in that direction. But these other people kind of influenced me because I did have an interest in eyes and vision. So I ended up going in that direction and spent 4 years in Memphis and then training, and then 1 year in Atlanta at a referral center where we saw patients that were referred by other doctors exclusively. So we didn't see the general population. It was strictly figuring out problems. And we had a lot of equipment and some doctors with very good expertise as our mentors and trainers. So I did that.
You ended up practicing in Valdosta, is that right?
Well, I ended up in Atlanta. I was invited to stay on staff, which I did for about a year. And these clinics that were referral practices, in other words, they weren't open to the public. They were just by referral only. I ended up almost going to New Orleans and then ended up going to Tucson. I ended up there and practiced there in that capacity for a few years. And then we had a baby. And you come to the point in life where you think, do I want my kids to know their grandparents and all? So my folks were in Marietta, or Mayretta, as some would say. Right. And my wife's folks were in Iowa, Des Moines, which is where she's from. And they also had a place in Florida, and they flew a plane. So after another long story, we ended up in Valdosta. And so it was perfect. When they flew from Iowa to Florida, they would plop down sometimes and come to visit, and we were closer to family. So it was one of those life decisions where you just say, you either do it or you don't. And we made a decision to come back. And also, I kind of wanted to get back into more family, instead of being specific in my scope of practice, to be more broad and to see families, establish relationships, and see a broader range of people and conditions and that sort of thing. So yeah, it was kind of a fit. And we spent a quarter of a century in Valdosta, which is, how it is when you get to be older, you look back and you go, wow, that went fast.
Well, you had a great career. And I think somebody said that you had several practices going on.
We had an office that was a pretty good size office, pretty good size staff, had a ambulatory surgical center, just different things going on. I did for a period of time, do some outreach clinics in underserved areas, which was difficult logistically because we require a lot of equipment and all of that. And I worked with the hospital in Homerville for a while and doing a clinic there, and Lake Park, the south of Valdosta. But eventually it got to be just too much running around, and I just was suffering for it. I laughingly refer to my little old lady patients who I love dearly, and they would look after me and say, "You're working too hard, Dr. Courtney, you need to slow down." And of course I didn't listen to them, but eventually I did. And we kind of consolidated, and everything was more manageable. But yeah, it was good. It was good for us because we had another child, a son. We have two sons.
You had a great career there, and you retired when?
About 5 years ago. And and the practice of healthcare is not quite as much fun as it used to be in certain respects, with the intrusion of businesses and government and all this sort of stuff. So I
heard that many times from doctors.
Yeah, 60 is a nice, it's a nice even number. So we kind of got our ducks in a row, and I sold out practice building. I mean, we got rid of everything and looked around to see what we wanted to do next. So yeah, it was about 5 years ago.
Wow. And so you're enjoying life on the East Coast. You're out there somewhere east of St. Mary's or Cumberland Island.
Been different places. We've been around the block a little bit, and had property in Florida and this and that. And we finally were thinking, okay, so where do we want to live? Because it's nice to be in exotic places and all, but where's an airport? Where's a hospital? Those types of practical considerations. We live literally, I'm looking out the window now, Bruce, and I'm looking at Florida. So we live on the map of Georgia. If you look southeast at St. Mary's, we're actually between St. Mary's and Cumberland Island. So we're on a marine peninsula.
Wow.
So it's extreme southeast Georgia, as we say.
Well, good for you. It's great to catch up with you. When you're friends for a period of time in a long life, and just for a short window, and to get caught up on all that's amazing. But so let's go back and talk about have you been a baseball fan your whole life? Were you growing up watching?
A fair weather fan. I have a history, a personal history in baseball that I actually played in 2 games.
Okay, that's all right.
A quick aside, my friend Britt, who was a catcher on our baseball team, we used to just mess around in a small town. We didn't have a lot to do, so we would just throw balls or do whatever. And we were throwing in his yard one day, and he said, "Wow, you've got some weird stuff. You ought to come talk to the coach." And it turns out all I had was heat. I could throw it very fast and very hard. I didn't know anything about pitching. So we went and did a little workout. And I was playing golf at the time. So at the end of the season, the baseball team was still playing. So the coach said, "Well, come on out." And I went out. And one of our pitchers was up like 6-0 in the game, and he decided I should go in. And I wish I had a visual of this, but Britt signals to me. I didn't know anything about pitching. I didn't even know a mound was actually a mound. And he would put his mitt in a position and point to it, and that was where I was supposed to throw the ball. So that was the signals. And I threw heat, and we got out of it. Well, that was the end of the season, and we had some region playoff or something. I don't know what it was, and we went to wherever we had to play, and I warmed up from about 20 feet throwing with this guy. And then when I got on the mound, it looked like a mile. I think it's like 60 feet or something like that, but everything was distorted, and there were people in the stands. And I was like, what am I doing here? So I found out that if you throw it really hard, there are people who can hit it really hard. And there was a fellow I remember, I think they detected the ball with a satellite somewhere. I mean, he hit it so far, I don't think they ever found the ball. And you probably know this, what a squeeze play is.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay, I didn't know a squeeze play from squeezing a lemon. And I was on the mound of this guy.
The guy's coming from third, yeah.
Well, he just started running. I thought, that cheating son of a, so I tried to nail him with the ball. And that precipitated what you can imagine to be some chaos. And at that point, that was the end of my career. And the coach pulled me out and said, "Good job, Cliff."
That's unbelievable. April of 1974, Hank Aaron was chasing Babe Ruth's record, and you and Britt found yourselves at that game. How did that come about? How did you end up going to that ball game that night?
Well, that's a little bit of the fuzzy part. We were going around trying to look at schools and that sort of stuff.
You were a senior in high school, right?
Yeah. So we ended up in Athens, I believe. One of his grandmother lived in Atlanta, and a friend of ours, Doug, was with us actually.
Yep.
And another guy named Gil Gibson, who I believe had the tickets. I'm not sure about that. I think he did. And I didn't pay a lot of attention to it, but with all the chatter going on and the alleged manipulation of Hank's schedule and where he would be when he hit the home run and all that, that's another story. But
Yeah.
we ended up at the game above first base, about midway up in the stand. So it wasn't exactly, close, but we all sat together and watched it. And of course, there was a lot of excitement about, here he is, and that sort of stuff. I believe there were, you probably know better than I do, but there were almost 54,000 people. I believe it was a capacity crowd.
Yeah, it was the biggest crowd ever at Fulton County Stadium. I read
Right.
that. Yeah.
I don't remember all the specifics, but I think it was the fourth inning.
Yep, I think you're right. Fourth inning. Had you guys talked about you're going to do something crazy at this game, or did you just?
Well, we talked, but we kind of got there we didn't really get there on time, is my memory. And apparently there was some announcement about any shenanigans and this and that and the other some morning, but I don't think we heard any of that. I don't remember it, but I think we got there a little bit late. We talked about just kidding, but one of the guys with us, I think it was Gil, we were teasing him about, we know Hank Aaron and all that stuff. And he called us some names, as he did. And so we said, we'll just go and say hi. And so we started walking down towards the field, kind of slowly down the steps. And what are we going to do? I don't know. Aaron came up, and so we kind of like down in front. We didn't want to, so we kind of crouched down, and he hit the ball, and we just ran, and I can understand how people would say, "Gosh, what a terrible thing to do." I completely get that, but there was no malice intended. It was strictly excitement and adrenaline at that point.
So just so everybody can be clear, you're talking to, if you baseball fans will know this, if you've ever seen a clip of Hank Aaron's 715th home run when he broke Babe Ruth's record on April the 8th, 1974, two guys ran around the bases with Hank Aaron. And I've been at Cooperstown several times. I've got a picture of me standing in a wall-sized picture of Hank Aaron and two guys running around the bases. One of those was Britt Gaston, who passed away a few years ago, and Cliff Courtney's friend, and the other was Cliff Courtney. And so we're talking to the guy who ran around the bases with Hank Aaron when he broke Babe Ruth's record. You can Google it, watch any video of Hank Aaron hitting that home run. You're going to see Cliff and Britt in that picture. So to give you a little background from my perspective, there were six of us that left the Lambda Chi house that Monday morning. I think that was a Monday. I'm not 100% sure, but it seems like it was. And we left. We said, let's go try to get tickets to this game, Hank. And you're right. They had held him out a game or two in Cincinnati because they wanted him to hit the home run in Atlanta. And I think the commissioner of baseball got involved in all that. So it was a little bit of manipulation of a schedule, but it was the first home game of the season. So everybody was going. We stood in line in the morning. It was cold. If you remember, Cliff, it was misty, rain, cold. It wasn't like a warm spring night. I can tell you that.
Right.
And so we stood in line and we got 6 tickets. For the life of me, you're talking about fuzzy. I can remember 4 of the people, and 2 of them have passed away. But we got the tickets. Then we went to Underground Atlanta, and college guys, Underground was a happening place back then. I'm surprised we made it back to the game, but we did on time, but we did. And I'll never forget when he hit that home run off Al Downing. He used to be a Yankee pitcher. He was a left-hander. And when Hank hit that home run, the place went crazy. I never, even from where I was in the outfield and left center field, that's where the ball went, but I was up much higher. But we were going so crazy about what had happened. I didn't notice anybody ran around the bases then. But the guy sitting next to me who drove us, I think he had the newest car is the reason that he drove us. He looked at me when I was literally standing in my seat screaming, and he asked me and had to yell for me to hear him, "What happened?" I said, "Hank Aaron just broke Babe Ruth's record." Then it dawned on me that he probably he was only there to drive. He wasn't a baseball fan at all. But wow, it was one of the greatest sporting events ever. So you guys ran around the bases, kind of on a whim, ran around the bases at Hank Aaron. You had no idea that you would be in the Hall of Fame one day.
Well, when you're 17 years old, your forethought, is not superior, and we
Really?
just didn't think it through. And we actually, when people say we ran around the bases, here's what we did: we jumped over, and there was a big tarp because I think they had unrolled a tarp.
Yeah.
And being young, we could jump over that, and there were police stationed around, but they were not a. I'm not saying I was a 4.240 runner, but I was a lot faster than these guys. And we met up with Hank just before second base, and then after he rounded second base, then we split off because we had no intention of. We didn't really think where we were going, so we made it over to on the left side of the field, and Britt got up in the stands somehow and ran, and then made a left turn and ran right into a cop. And I had my hands on the rail, and people were moving out so they could help me get up, and I got caught by my belt on the back of my pants and pulled down by security.
And so the other thing, it's interesting what was going on there is, of course, I remember it vaguely. You probably remember it vaguely, but we had no idea that Hank Aaron was getting all this hate mail from all the people that didn't want this black man to break Babe Ruth's record. And we were kind of oblivious to that. We were Hank Aaron fans. We wanted him to win. I guess there were a few people doing that, but and in fact, I know it was. In today's world, with that going on, with you guys, I wondered you would have gotten shot by running out there, right?
Well, we could have been shot that night, as it turns out, but I think we were aware vaguely of negativity, and as you just put it, we were Hank Aaron fans. I mean, Braves fans, and all of that. So it really, I hate to use the expression colorblind, but that's kind of what it was. It wasn't a black white thing. It was an incredible performance and a 1 in a zillion athlete.
Same with me. I was watching my idol, when they moved to Atlanta in 1966. He was unbelievable baseball player. He did, they called him 5.2s. He could run fast. He could throw. He could hit for average, hit for power. He could do it all. Steal bases. He was something.
Well,
I didn't care what color he was. He was just great.
People talk about hammering Hank and slamming and all of that, but yeah, that's a really important point to me. And I think a lot of baseball people know this, that he was just an incredible athlete. And he, I guess a comparison would be like they talk about Jack Nicklaus and his 18 majors. Well, how many times did he come in second?
Oh, yeah.
So he was incredible. So it was that way with Hank. When you look at RBIs and all the other stats that are kept, he was an amazing performer and an amazing fielder.
Right.
So
you guys, Britt got up in the stands, and you were caught before you got in the stand. Somebody grabbed your belt. So I assume you guys got thrown in the tank somewhere, right?
Well, what happened is I didn't know what happened to Britt, but I stood by the side, and I told him, I said, look, I'm not going anywhere, it's cool. And then there were fireworks, and I remember the explosion of sound was deafening, and the fireworks, it was a surreal experience. And I just thought, what the heck have we done? So they took us to a little holding tank, I guess, a precinct in the stadium.
Right.
And there were other people down there. Apparently, earlier in the game in left field, some guys that were drunk jumped out in the field, and they took them off. Well, they kind of pushed us together, and one of the guys was getting mouthy and cursing the cops and being a real problem. And I turned to a policeman next to me. I said, I want to be clear, we're not with these guys.
You're right.
So they transported us, and it was not by limousine, to the downtown lockup in Atlanta, which for those of you visiting Atlanta looking for accommodations, I don't recommend it. It was not a pleasant place. It was, I guess they would call it a drunk tank, and there were all kinds of unusual folks there. There was a dark area down this hallway in the back where they had steel slat cots with people in various stages of consciousness in repose. And there was a large man at one point in the open section that had a telephone and bars and all that. He announced he was going to kill us and other people. And
how long were you in there?
Well, we were in there for several hours, and the police didn't seem to be concerned that this guy was acting up. And of course, we were very concerned for our safety. But Britt's dad actually bailed us out. I don't remember the time, but it was early 30. It must have been 3 or 4 in the morning, maybe.
I would assume he was not a happy camper, right?
That would be correct. His sense of humor was left at wherever he was staying, and rightfully so. So the rest is a blur to me. Although we were required to show up in front of a judge at about 8:30 in the morning, I believe, or 9 or something like that. I forget what time.
So were you ever charged with anything? Did they drop it?
If I remember correctly, the wording was unlawfully interfering with the occupation of another,
Right.
or something like that. It could have been idiocy, public idiocy.
Right. Did you have to pay a fine? Do you remember? Or you just
Yeah, there was some sort of fine, and there was a one point where I think Britt had watched too many lawyer shows on TV, and he wanted to say something to the judge about, well, we weren't aware of the ordinances and all. And I remember the judge pulling his readers off of his nose and looking at him, and I grabbed him. I said, "Sit the down, shut up."
Britt was a character. Right? There's no question about that. I remember him as well.
I think his dad would have pinched his head off if he'd had the reach. So we ended up, he told us if we kept our nose clean and, for 6 months or whatever it was, this thing would all go away, which it did. There was a rumor that Hank personally intervened on our behalf. And to the best of my knowledge, that is not the case.
But you did meet him later. So tell us how that came about. He was very nice to you guys. And I know, just tell us a little bit about what happened with Hank after that.
Before I get into that, I'd like to mention too, that my mother and father were at home watching the game on black and white television. And when he hit the home run, my mother, being a mother, immediately, "That's Cliff and that's Britt." And so they had a Polaroid camera and took a picture of the screen, which I think I have somewhere. So it's amazing that they would, on this little television, would have recognized us, but I guess that's a mother, right?
So your mother was looking at a black and white, your parents were looking at a black and white TV and realized that was you. I was in the stands. I was going so crazy. I didn't even realize anybody ran on the field. I knew a lot of people ran on the field, to congratulate him, but
yeah, it was pandemonium.
Yeah. Sure. Oh my gosh. It was unbelievable. I'll never forget it. As long as I live, it was unbelievable. People asked us, what was Hank like? And he seemed like he was pushing you away or something. He was actually, his arms were going left and right, and we got just tangled up a little bit. We patted him on the back and said, "Way to go," and and all something like that. But my recollection is he was kind of in a zone, almost. I can't even wrap my head around the amount of pressure on him. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the oppressive weight of the historic moment, the racial overtones, the threats. I mean, to be able to perform at that level anyways, under the best of circumstances, is amazing. But under the circumstances that he was in, it was inhuman. But he seemed to be kind of zoned out. And I guess maybe he was concentrating on touching the bases. Wouldn't that be something? Hey, you missed second base.
Oh, God. Yeah.
But anyways, we did hook up. I was in school in Memphis, and in 1984, the 10-year reunion, I got a call about coming for for that. They're going to have a reenactment and all that sort of thing. And I was embroiled in studies and clinic obligations and things I just couldn't get out of. So I had to pass on that. And then in 1994, there was a 20-year anniversary, and I'm a little bit fuzzy on what happened there. But I can remember, to go forward, it seemed like 1995, maybe. Got a call from a guy named Mike Tolan. And by this time, my wife and I had moved from Arizona to Valdosta. Mike Tolan is a California writer-director, and he got a contract to do a movie called Hank Aaron Chasing the Dream under Turner.
Right.
So he asked me if I'd agree to be interviewed for the movie. And again, I was busy. I can't just drop what I'm doing. I've got obligations. But I had a meeting in Atlanta for some of our professional association business downtown at a law office. And he said, "Well, we're going to be filming downtown during that 2-week period. Can I send a car to come get you?" I said, "Sure." So I made arrangements, drove me down to Turner. He told me Britt had already agreed to do it, and they were getting him in from South Carolina. So we got there, and then Hank was there, although we didn't see him, and they had media there. And I think they wanted to throw us in like, fighting dogs to see what would happen when we saw each other. And once we did, Hank, to that first time and every time after that, was as gracious and kind as he could possibly be. Much to my surprise, he had no reason to be nice, to even acknowledge our existence. But I think it speaks to the man that he as I like to put it, he walked the walk. You know, he just was that kind of guy. And we filmed for about, I think, 45 minutes or an hour. You know how they do in movies, they cut it up and, you know, put everything together. But we took a lot of pictures. We had a good time, a lot of laughs. And later on, there was the film premiered in Atlanta, and I took my sister as my date. And Ted and Jane and all these dignitaries and, you know, and mayors and all these people were there. And it got to a point in the film where there was some serious stuff going on. And then it was followed by a point where I forget who it was, Britt or I were thanking the guard for not pulling his pistol out and shooting us, and complimenting him on his superior judgment. And the place blew up in laughter. And later, Mike Tolan came to me and said, "You son of a, you got the biggest laugh of all."
I bet.
And I said, "Mike, talk to my people." And he just shook his head.
It's an unbelievable story. And so you were able to meet him several times. I actually talked to his personal assistant who worked for him for years. Her name is Carla Kaplan. And she actually, her mother grew up in Reynolds, Georgia. Began to tell me her relationship with Hank Aaron, and he was still living then. But she remembers you guys. She remembers being at something and meeting you guys and what, you know, great guys you were. She certainly, there was no animosity between Hank Aaron and his team towards you guys. I think that it's a moment in history that happened, and it turned out well. It could have been ugly, but it turned out unbelievably well. That's a great story.
I mean, better than it should have. And we certainly we realized the morning after, when we saw the newspapers, we were really feeling kind of bad and embarrassed by it, because we realized that we were interlopers. We inserted ourselves into his moment, and we had no right to do that. We just weren't thinking with matured brains. And it just blew up bigger than we ever considered. My recollection is the person that I knew that was closest to Hank was Susan Bailey, who we've communicated. In fact, I've communicated with her at various times, including after Hank's passing. And she's always been very, very nice. But the times we spent with Hank, he's always just down to earth, smiling, gracious, kind. In fact, in 2010, we got together, and this is a report on ESPN, and I'll read it to you. A quote. Aaron talking about us. "It's wonderful to see them. I often get asked whatever happened to those two guys. It's nice to see them once again and know that they're doing fine, doing well. The older you get, the more you think about it. I'm just glad things worked out the way they did. It could have been a lot worse. They were having fun with it as kids. They didn't get beat up and all of that. I think they spent 2 or 3 hours in jail. Other than that, it was a happy moment." And this is a quote from Hank Aaron. From Hank,
arguably the greatest baseball player of all time. You told me, I think, that you've never been to Cooperstown to the Hall of Fame, right?
I've seen a lot of it virtually from people sending me photos of exactly the wall you're talking about, standing next to it.
Well, there's also, when I remember going in, as a big kiosk, obviously Hank Aaron stuff's all in there. There's a big kiosk, and it's a big video of him hitting the home run, and you guys are running around the bases. I've been there several times. I had businesses in Aniana, which was close to Cooperstown, so I was in and out of there. But I was blown away. I was telling the guy, "I know these guys." He said, "You're lying. I promise you. I was there. I know these guys." I was thinking that I already knew you, but in reality, I really got to know you after that. I couldn't, it's just, it gets fuzzy. You're the last man standing here. Hank died last year. Britt died several years ago. Let's talk about Britt. I know he was a character. If I had to guess, he was probably the instigator, and he talked you into going out there. I may be wrong, but he was a character. He was a great guy. Talk a little bit about him.
Yeah, Britt is, some would say, kind of full of himself, which was true, but he was also, a charismatic character. And like we all do, we have our pros and cons and that sort of thing. And he was no different. But for some reason, he and I just clicked when we first met, and we played, sports together and did all kinds of things. But he was a fellow who, I don't think he worked very hard academically, but he was very bright. There's no question about that. He was a political person and was plugged into especially conservative politics. He was very active in Athens and enjoyed himself immensely. And I'll leave it at that.
As many of us did, yeah.
Yeah, he was, well, except for me, I walked the straight and narrow path of righteousness my entire life.
I'm sure, right.
Yes. Thanks for that. But he was a Kappa Alpha. And when we both went to Mercer University the first year and pledged Kappa Alpha, and I backed out because we both were talking, as a lot of people in my freshman class did, talked about transferring. So coming from a very small high school, I felt like going to a big school would be maybe too much, which is why we both ended up at Mercer, which is another crazy story. But we ended up in Athens, and I had backed out of the Kappa Alpha because I knew Doug, and I didn't know what I wanted to do or even be in a fraternity in Athens. Right. But if I remember correctly, he maybe spent a little more time than I did in Athens. He had a number of extracurricular activities,
and I'm sure you guys had conversations over the years after that. When you see yourself on TV, I'm sure you still communicated.
What happened in the following many years is we were hounded by media.
I was going to ask you that, yeah.
But it got to the point where I would just turn over the phone to my wife, because sometimes these sports shows, they would call from the West Coast and we were on the East Coast, and right. The time difference, and they'd, hey, this is so and so and so, and we want to, blah blah blah, and I got to the point where everything that had been said that needed to have been said was said, and I just didn't want to talk about it, and I didn't want to appear as though, and I'm sure Britt felt the same way. I know he felt the same way, to be capitalizing or in any way promoting ourselves as individuals on this, which was totally about Hank Aaron. And we never did monetize or attempt to monetize or do anything. And Hank knew that. He knew that we were respectful and contrite to a certain extent about the whole thing. And but he was so nice that it just didn't feel negative. But I understand how people would feel that way. And in fact, I was at a function, this happened more than once, but there were some of my friends that knew this would always try to play jokes on me. And I was at a function, and one of my friends was, well, you remember those guys, and and the fellow said something about, yeah, those ass. And he said, turn around. And then he turned around. Oh, it's great to meet you. What?
Well, I can promise you one thing. I'm 67. And I look back on that and just smile. It was an innocent thing. You guys ran around the bases, the greatest sports thing. You in the Hall of Fame forever. You really, your life was changed a little bit after right. Making a one little decision. But it could have turned out bad, but it turned out great. It's a heck of a story.
Let me tell you about the last time I saw Hank. In 2014, the 40-year reunion. Britt had passed away in 2011. So I was contacted. And again, I just quit talking about this because I didn't want to talk about it anymore. But I got contacted about going up to Atlanta for that. And there was going to be a big celebration. A lot of the folks peripheral to this were going to be there. And so I went. And Hank had slipped and broken his hip, and he ended up with a partial hip replacement, and he was kind of using a walker to get around. I don't think he was very happy about that because, he wanted to, walk around. So I went with my wife, Lynn. We went to they had a skybox at the stadium, and some people met us there, some handlers, and we were taken there, and we got separated. At one point, they said, well, you come with us. They took her, and then they took me. And I was in a golf cart down below in the bowels of the stadium going one direction, and then who comes against in the opposite direction? It was Hank being driven. And I remember he had his leg kind of hanging out sideways. And so we both stopped carts and greeted and talked a little bit. And so he was going one way, I was going the other. So we ended up in the skybox with some other people, and they were going to have a celebration and interviews and all this stuff at home plate. Well, it turns out that Dusty Baker, they had not seen or heard from him, and he was supposed to be there to do part of the interview. And all of a sudden I was approached by the quote unquote people. I said, look, if Dusty doesn't make it in time, will you do the interview?
That's great.
And I said, me? 40th anniversary, home plate, crowd, media. Are you sure that's a good idea? And so they convinced me. So off we go from the skybox and going down. And then who do we run into? a running Dusty Baker who made it in the nick of time. So we all went down together to the dugout where they brought the actual bat and ball, and people did interviews, and I got to watch, so I didn't have to sit there and be glad I wore brown pants. But it was fun because I got to meet people I hadn't met before. Tom House and his wife, we talked for a long time. Al Downing and I talked about everything but baseball. Dusty Baker, and at one point I was standing at a table where Hank was sitting, a long table, and I just happened to look to my right, and my wife was talking to a Sports Illustrated photographer, and he kind of lined up the lens in my direction. So I kind of looked, and then I looked to my left, just glanced, and there was Holyfield. And he was still extremely intimidating. So I kept my distance, but we took pictures and gave Hank this cake that depicted two hands holding a bat, and he was very kind as usual. And Billy was there, his wife. And there were a lot of great memories. They even had, at one point, they were introducing all the people connected to this. They took us outside of the box and sat us in the seats outside, you'd watch the game from, and pushed me out. And I'm like, I don't belong here. What am I doing here? It just felt a little odd, and especially felt odd, without Britt. To wrap that thought up, the idea of me being here as the so-called, as you put it, the last man standing does feel odd. And I haven't talked about this because I'm kind of done with it, but you're an old friend, and I wanted to, I actually, after you approached me about this, I started thinking, this does bring back a lot of memories, and maybe it's a good time to revisit that and just think about it again. So I appreciate you asking me.
Well, listen, I appreciate you doing it. You're doing it as a favor. Did you end up in Sports Illustrated? I'm sure your pictures have been in a lot of magazines.
It's all over the place. I've gotten so many requests to do this and that and sign this and sign that. I quit signing a long time ago. Speaking of signing, Britt and I in 2010, I believe, we were sitting in Turner Field in Hank's office over left field, just the three of us, and we had met and done an interview. And you can find these interviews online. The three of us were at a table being interviewed about that time. We went to his office and we signed balls for his foundation because they would auction them off. And I can remember us laughing and talking and like, Hank, okay, what's the trick to signing a baseball? Because Britt and I were not known for our.
He had signed a few, I can tell you that.
So it was kind of weird to do that, and we were happy to help out. And he was very gracious as always. And my wife and my sons came in and pictures and all that sort of stuff, and just could not have been nicer. And I'll always appreciate that for the kindness that he showed us without any reason to actually be that way. It was just the way he was. I think it's just one of those things that happened. And as Hank has put it, it's, you can spend this any way you want to. And he's chosen to behave the way he behaved and talk about it the way he talked about it. And I think that's something that everyone can learn from. You have a choice how you look at it. And we were kind of sheepish and embarrassed. And he was very kind and had nice things to say. And you can turn something that could potentially be negative into a positive.
And that's a great life lesson. And no matter what you're in, right? You can take any circumstances and make it positive. And he did the right thing. And wow, what a story. What a story.
Yeah, that's just, I think it is a life lesson. And, I've heard all kinds of comments about him, about he's, the greatest thing since sliced bread, or he's, wears his race on his sleeve and all of that. But I just think he was a humble person from humble beginnings who had exceptional ability. But there are people who have exceptional ability, but they don't have the brain to go with it. And just as a human being, it's one of those magical matchups of someone's personality and character with their physical ability. And that's a pretty rare thing.
Well, I can tell you as a baseball fan, I really am, not just a Braves fan, a baseball fan, it was absolutely incredible that I happened to know the guys that ran around the bases with Hank Aaron. And it's more incredible now, 50 years later almost, to talk to you about.
I'd like to read one thing.
Please
I have not talked about this at all. I haven't made any comments, but when Hank passed, I felt an obligation to say something. again, it's all about Hank. It's not about us at all. So I did make a post on Facebook, and it's entitled To Henry Louis Aaron, January 22nd, 2021. And it goes like this. It is no small irony that your passing occurs at this troubled time when so many could benefit from examining your life. The negativity, hypocrisy, dishonesty, and petty divisiveness that exist today stand in stark contrast to your example of personal integrity and quiet dignity. Accomplishment despite adversity and grace under pressure, you walk the walk. Today, I will be thinking of you. I hope everyone else will too. Maybe we can all do a little better. Thanks for being nice to me, Hank. No, Mr. Aaron.
Wow. Unbelievable. Cliff, thank you, my friend, very much. What a story.
Hey, it's good. And, another collateral, they talk about collateral damage, and other collateral benefit out of this is we got to reconnect, didn't we?
Oh, my gosh. Absolutely. I mean, that's my whole thing. I haven't talked to you in like years. You've done me a huge favor. Thank you, my friend.
Hey, good to talk to you.
All right. Thank you.
All right,
Appreciate
bye.
it. Bye-bye.
Viewing life from a hearse, it could be worse. Laugh, think, and cry with the country undertaker.